Well, with the Pacific Division all wrapped up, what did the Calgary Flames do down the stretch to get ready for the Stanley Cup Playoffs? And one game. We got a tease, but it just didn't play out that way. For the final time in the regular season, you'll know what I mean, as it's time for another episode of Hi there, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to another episode of my Calgary Flames game recaps. This was a different intro because I'm calling it my Calgary Flames in 4, as we are looking on games 79 to 82 of the 2021-22 regular season for season 4, episode number 15. As I did mention in the opening, what did the Calgary Flames really have to play for, knowing that they clinched the Pacific Division title and knew that their position was fixed no matter what in the standings? They pretty much treated these last 4 games, I would say, as somewhat as a preseason, just to try to fine-tune their game and get into the playoffs as healthy as possible. So that's what this video will be talking about, the final 4 games of the regular season, and as I say, a few milestones have been achieved as well. So before I get my notes and get into the episode itself, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, home of the Flames, Hitmen, Roughneck Stampeders, as well as the Calgary FC, just make sure you hit like and subscribe, as I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel where I recap games and stories, but I also do have a variety of non-sports content in my library already, with personal vlogs, attempt comedy, and I do share my experience sitting on the road or a sport event and vlogging to go, but I just haven't had as much time to do that the last few months. But if that still all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, do follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey. You know you do, so make sure you hit like, subscribe, and my other social links down in the description below. And I have my second channel in Brett Hornby Shorts, where I exclusively put my short form content on there. So let's bring them notes. And how did the final 4 games went for the Calgary Flames? One game definitely was a dandy that I'm going to say looked like it might have been a potential preview, all for naught, as if you know what I mean. So let's get into the notes. So game 79, this happened on Saturday, April the 23rd. This was the final home game of the regular season for the Calgary Flames before the playoffs, as they were hosting the Vancouver Canucks on Hockey Night Canada. So this was an 8 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. So how did things go against the Vancouver Canucks, knowing that they actually had a nice push going down the stretch, but the odds were definitely stacked against Vancouver Canucks, as they were running out of real estate, and you could say that this game, if we're going to say, sunk the ship for the Vancouver Canucks, but they were already in tough. However, there was no scoring to report in the first period, so we had a 0-0 game going into the second period. I'm also going to say there were no penalties in the first period, as this was a very, very tame game for Calgary and Vancouver. There was no, line brawls, just say. That happened, let's say, a few years ago, and coaches yelling at each other, and one coach wants to get into the locker room to kick his ass. This was a very tame Calgary-Vancouver game, as Vancouver was fighting for their, fate playoff hopes, while Calgary already knew their fate was sealed. So now going into the second period, early in the second period, Calgary did get on the board first, as it was Elias Lindholm. He scored on the power play. He also joined the 40-goal club for the Calgary Flames. So Calgary had a 1-0 lead. This was at the 2:44-minute mark of the second period. And then, just 16 seconds later, sadly this guy has definitely turned it on. Maybe he could be a big plugger for the Flames in the playoffs, is Dylan Dubé, wearing the same number as my childhood favorite Flame, Joe Otto, number 29. He scored his 15th goal of the season at exactly the 3-minute mark. So Calgary had an early 2-0 lead early in the second period. Vancouver did be able to get themselves on the board themselves, but it was not until the 1846 minute mark of the second period, as it was Quinn Hughes, one of three Hughes brothers in the National Hockey League, his seventh of the season. So we had a 2-1 lead for Calgary going into the third period. Going into the third period, it was still 2-1 going in, but then Vancouver, they made things interesting as they tied it up at the 5:36 minute mark, as it was Connor Garland. He got his 18th goal of the season to make it 2-2 at that point. So Vancouver was hanging around, as both teams, I'm going to say, played relatively even at this stage of the game. However, the Calgary Flames slowly were starting to pull away, as literally 14 seconds later, after the Connor Garland's goal, Brett Ritchie for the Calgary Flames scored his third of the season at the 5:50 minute mark of the third period to put Calgary back up 3-2. And then later in the period, Dylan Dubé scored his second of the game, 16th of the season at 13:33, so that made it 4-2 for Calgary. And then literally 12 seconds later, Nikita Zadorov, Brett Ritchie and Nikita Zadorov, they also wanted to score some goals too, as he got his fourth goal of the season at 13:45 third period to make it 5-2 for Calgary. It looked like Calgary at this point were going to put away this one. Then we had a couple of later goals in the period. At 17:35, Vancouver got within two, as it was Elias Pettersson, depending on what you hear, I heard Pettersson over both, got his 32nd goal of the season at 17:35. That made it 5-3 for Calgary at that point. And then Johnny Gaudreau put it away in the empty net at 18:21 of the third period to make it 6-2, his 39th goal of the season. So ultimately, over 6-3, and ultimately, as I mentioned, the Calgary Flames won this game 6-3. So the Flames wrapped up their last game of the regular season at home with a victory, 6-3. Shots on net were even apiece at 31. As I mentioned, it was a very, very tame vanilla game for Calgary and Vancouver, given the matchup and the circumstances. As I mentioned, no line brawls, no coaches yelling at each other. No one coach wanted to go in the locker room to kick his ass like that was going to happen, referring to that line brawl. But those are the good old days. They'll happen again down the road, just not this year. So anyway, for the Calgary Flames leading the way, well, Dylan Dubé obviously led the way with 2 goals. So as Elias Lindholm had a goal and assist. And Chris Tanev, he also had a big game with 3 assists, and Johnny Gaudreau with a goal and 2 assists. And then Calgary actually did play Dan Vidar a few more games down the stretch, resting up Jacob Markstrom. Dan Vidar was in net for this one. He made 28 saves on 31 shots. So leading the way for the Vancouver Canucks, well, the Quinn Hughes had a goal and an assist for 2 points. And then JT Miller, just like Chris Tanev, he had 3 assists in this game. And then it was Thatcher Demko, who was in net for the Vancouver Canucks. He made 25 saves on 30 shots. So ultimately, although the odds are stacked and slim against the Vancouver Canucks, that loss pretty much sunk their fate for the playoffs. But I think it had to get to the point that Vancouver had to win like 12 games in a row just to get in. So it was definitely a very vanilla game. But I'm going to say I like Vancouver's chances in the future for being a competitive team, maybe as soon as next season, that maybe Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver will all be the top 3 teams in the Pacific Division. So that was game number 79. Game number 80, this happened on Tuesday, April the 26th, as the Calgary Flames wrapped up the regular season with a 3-game road trip. And this one started off in Nashville at the Bridgestone Arena, 6 p.m. puck drop. And I was keep thinking this whole time, this was going to be a playoff preview, and if this happens to be a playoff series, oh boy, buckle up, it's going to be entertaining. This game did not disappoint, for sure. So this was a very, very entertaining game, and we could still maybe meet in the playoffs when I get to the standing story and how things shook down. So go first in the first period. there was only one goal to report. That went to the Calgary Flames, and it was Dylan Dubé who scored on the power play at 4:02, his 17th of the season. So Calgary had a 1-0 lead out of the first period, and it stayed 1-0 out of the first period. However, there were definitely a lot of penalties in this game, to put it very, very lightly. As let's highlight that at 16:53 of the first period, it was Tanner Jenrette. He had a fight with Eric Gabranson of the Calgary Flames, and Matthew Tkachuk had a high sticking with Matt Duchene. So Matthew Tkachuk had an incident with Matt Duchene, and also had a unsportsmanlike conduct. And then if that was not enough for one fight in the first period, later in the first period at 18:38, it was Matt Boricki of Nashville. He had a fight with Milan Lucic. So we definitely had a lot of rough stuff in the first period. It was almost like this could have been a potential playoff preview, as I say, at the time of this game. And the fact that Calgary played in Nashville a week before, but that was that rescheduled game from December. So it definitely was a dandy in the first period. But just one goal, but it was more rough stuff that highlighted the first period. Second period, things definitely got a lot more interesting, a lot more offense. First at the 5:41 minute mark, it was Roman Josi, the defenseman who might be favored to win the Calder Trophy, or at least be on the ballot. And he definitely was on a pace to potentially get 100 points, as he got his 22nd goal of the season at 5:41 of the second period to tie this game up at 1-1. And then at 8:08 in the second period, the Nashville Predators, they took a lead, and Matt Duchene scored his 42nd goal of the season at 8:08. So now we had a 2-1 game for Nashville at that point. But Calgary did not go away as easily, as it was Dylan Dubé who got his second goal of the game, his second straight 2-goal game. This happened at 13:54 of the second period. He got his 18th goal of the season to tie up the game at 2-2, and that's actually how things stood after the second period. We had a 2-2 game. Now looking down in the penalty summary, there were definitely a lot more rough stuff, as there was a couple of slashing penalties and tripping penalties to start off the second period. And then Matthew Tkachuk once again took an unsportsmanlike conduct against Luke Kunin. I'm going to say he definitely came back later in this game in a big way for Matthew Tkachuk. And then at the end of the second period, you had Nikita Zadorov roughing with Tanner Jenrette, Blake Coleman cross-checking with Tanner Jenrette, and Tanner Jenrette roughing against Nikita Zadorov at the end of the second period. So I'm going to say these two teams didn't like each other in this game in particular, and it was still tied at 2-2 going into the third period. Going into the third period, well, Nashville disrupt early again, as Philip Forsberg took advantage of that extra penalty that Calgary took at the end of the second period, as Philip Forsberg got his 41st goal of the season 30 seconds into the second period. So that made it 3-2 for Nashville at that point. Just over a minute and a half later, Noah Hanifin got his 10th goal of the season for Calgary at 2:03. So that tied up the game at 3-3. At that point, however, going towards the midway point of the third period, once again, the power play, it was Philip Forsberg who scored at 9:35. So that made it 4-3 for Nashville. As we get in later in the period of the third period, it was still 4-3 for Nashville. And ultimately, UC Soros, the starting goalie for Nashville, he got hurt. He got replaced by David Riddick. That name might sound familiar. Yeah, Big Stave Dave. He took over net for the Nashville Predators late in the third period, and looked like that he was going to seal the deal for the Nashville Predators. However, literally with just under a second left in the third period, Calgary actually tied it up, and it was Matthew Tkachuk, the guy who has been a pest with the Nashville Predators all game, scored the tying goal in dramatic fashion with a second left. That did the review that there was time left on the clock. So in 19:59, Matthew Tkachuk tied it up for Calgary, his 41st of the season. So make it 4-4, and just like that, it was 4-4. And with the second left, I'm going to say this one needed overtime. In overtime, both sides had a few chances. However, Calgary had a few more chances and ultimately kept in their Nashville zone. It was Elias Lindholm who did score the overtime winner at 2:01, getting his 41st goal of the season. So ultimately, the Calgary Flames stole this one in a very dramatic thriller with a 5-4 victory against the Nashville Predators. And I was thinking, if this winds up being a playoff series, it's going to be a dandy and a beauty. You probably need all 7 games. But what a game it ultimately was. Well, actually, the season series, the Predators did actually take 2 out of 3, but all 3 games required extra time. So none of these games in the regular season series was decided in regulation. So if this would have been a playoff series, it would have been definitely a lot of overtime, as I shall say. So when it comes to shots on goal, the Calgary Flames actually outshot the Nashville Predators 38-23 overall, including 4-1 in the overtime. So leading the way for the Calgary Flames, you had a few multi-point games. You had Dylan Dubé, who had 2 goals. Noah Hanifin had a goal and an assist. And then Rasmus Andersson and Johnny Gaudreau each chipped in with 2 goals. But I think Matthew Tkachuk definitely was the biggest impact for Calgary on this game, both with the extracurriculars and scoring that tying goal with a second left. And then when it comes to the goaltending story of the game, it was Dan Vladar, who was in net for Calgary this one, as he made 19 saves on 23 shots. So leading the way for the Nashville Predators, while Philip Forsberg led the way with 2 goals, as well as you had a few more players in multi-point games, as you had Roman Josi with a goal and 2 assists, and Michael Gramlin, he had 3 assists for Nashville, as well as Matt Duchene with a goal and 2 assists for 3 points. And then the goaltending story of the game, Juuse Saros started. He made 30 saves on 33 shots before he got injured late. And then ultimately David Riddick was in that. He made 3 saves on 5 shots. So yes, that was game number 80 against the Nashville Predators. That definitely was a very, very entertaining game. And I'm going to say, it'd be nice if this became a playoff series, which still could happen once I get to the standing story on that. So that was game 80. So game 81, this happened on Thursday, April the 28th, as the Calgary Flames were continuing on the road trip as they were taking on the Minnesota Wild. And maybe we could be playing Minnesota in the playoffs if both teams go on a run. It would have to be at least until the conference championship. But I'm going to say this one was also another entertaining game, I should say. Definitely not your Jacques Lemaire coached Minnesota Wild. So going into the first period, there was actually no scoring to report. So it was no score after the first period. So going to the second period, well, Johnny Gaudreau, he joined the 40-goal club with Elias Lindholm and Matthew Tkachuk. He got his 40th goal of the season at 2:59 of the second period. So Calgary scored first by taking a 1-0 lead. However, Minnesota did come back, as it was Jonas Brodin who got his 5th of the season at 6:02 the second period on the power play to make it 1-1. And actually, that's how things stood after the first period, with 1-1 tie going into the third period. And after the Nashville game, this one definitely was a lot tamer by comparison. But I'm going to say maybe had some same dramatics, but not to the same extent. So going into the third period, tied up at 1-1. It wasn't until going into the second half of the second period, or third period I should say, that we had the next goal. This one did not come until 11:59 of the third period, and it was scored by Frederick Gaudreau. No relation to Johnny Gaudreau, as I believe Frederick Gaudreau actually is Canadian from Quebec, while Johnny Gaudreau is from Jersey. So Frederick Gaudreau scored. No relation. His 14th goal of the season. So Minnesota took a 2-1 lead at this point in the third period. However, Calgary did tie it up late, going into the later minutes of the third period. It was Elias Lindholm who got his 42nd goal of the season at 17:04. So tied up at 2-2, and for the second straight game, this one needed overtime. So going into overtime, Minnesota had only the couple chances, and ultimately the overtime winner went to Kirill Kaprizov for the Minnesota Wild, who got his 46th goal of the season on the power play, as Calgary actually had a closing on the hand penalty late in the third period. So Kirill Kaprizov scored on the power play 44 seconds in to make it 3-2, and ultimately the Minnesota Wild, they won this one 3-2, and Kirill Kaprizov definitely has been a much different story for Minnesota Wild in terms of showing that they're not the same Minnesota Wild that they first came into the league, playing that defensive trap style. So when it comes to the shots in this game, Calgary did outshoot the Minnesota Wild 33-25. Overall, Minnesota had the edge in overtime, 2-0 in shots. So who led the way for the Calgary Flames? Obviously, Johnny Gaudreau had a goal and assist for 2 points. Nikita Zadorov actually chipped in with 2 assists, so those were the 2 multi-point getters for the Calgary Flames. And then for the Minnesota Wild, it was Frederick Gaudreau had a goal and assist for 2 points, and then Kirill Kaprizov scored the big goal in overtime. So when it comes to the goaltending story of this game, Jacob Markstrom was in net for Calgary. He made 22 saves on 25 shots. While the Minnesota Wild, it was Cam Talbot. That name might sound familiar. Yes, that same Cam Talbot. He made 31 saves on 33 shots. So that was game number 81 in Minnesota. So game 82, the last game of the regular season. The Calgary Flames wrap up the road trip and regular season in Winnipeg. This happened on Friday, April the 29th, as Calgary was taking on Winnipeg at the Canada Life Center, 6 p.m. puck drop. It was at the XL Energy Center for Minnesota at 6 p.m. As well as, I'm going to say this one definitely was a very vanilla game, as this definitely was a meaningless game for both sides, even more so because both teams knew their playoff fates, but there still were a few key players that scored in this game, I should say. Actually, Calgary did score first at the 3:19 minute mark of the first period. It was Matthew Tkachuk who scored his 42nd goal of the season to make it 1-0 for Calgary. However, Winnipeg did tie it up very late in the first period, as it was Blake Wheeler who got his 16th goal of the season at 19:47 of the first period. So make it 1-1. So we had a 1-1 game going into the second period. Now going into the second period, Winnipeg did add another goal to take their first lead of the game, as it was Mason Appleton who got his 8th goal of the season at 6:06 of the second period, and that was the only goal of the second period. So Winnipeg had a 2-1 lead going into the third period, and in the third period, it definitely was a very, very tame, vanilla third period. There was definitely a lot of shots on both sides, but not very many quality shots. But ultimately, it was Brendan Dillon who put it away in the empty net at the 1940 minute mark of the third period. So there wasn't really too much exciting to report for this game. But Winnipeg ultimately won this one 3-1. As I said, this game didn't have any implications for either side because both teams knew their fate, that either being in the playoffs or not, as Winnipeg knew for a while they were not going to be in the playoffs. So when it comes to shots, actually Winnipeg, I'm going to say, had the slight edge in play, given this was their last game, or second last game, because one game got postponed due to a snowstorm, as Winnipeg outshot Calgary 43-33 in this one. So leading the way, obviously only the goal from Matthew Tkachuk was the only thing that stood out for the Calgary Flames. So Dan Vidar actually was in net for Calgary. He made 40 saves on 42 shots. While the Winnipeg Jets, no one had a multi-point game for the Winnipeg Jets, but it was Connor Hellebuck who was in net for Winnipeg. He made 32 saves on 33 shots. Excuse me. So ultimately, that is the regular season for the Calgary Flames. So that was game number 82. So how things go with the Calgary Flames as they had their second best regular season in franchise history. As overall, the Calgary Flames, they finished the season with 50 wins. Third time in franchise history, the Calgary Flames won 50 games. The other two seasons that they won over 50 games, well, they won 54 in 1988-89, the year they won the Stanley Cup. And then they won 50 games back in 2018-19. I'm going to say now this is the best regular season the Calgary Flames has had in a generation. As I say, Calgary won 50, they lost 21. Then they had 11 overtime or shootout points, which gave them 111 points on the season, which that actually is the second best point total the Calgary Flames have put up in franchise history. The most points they put up was in 1988-89 when they had 117 points. That also happened to be the year they won the Stanley Cup. And they finished first in the Pacific Division. However, they did not win the best record in the conference, as Colorado had that, as when we get to the standings portion of that. So that was the standings for the Calgary Flames. So if you look at the entire league for the standings, once we get to the standings for the regular season, as I'm finding. So for the Western Conference, as I say, the Pacific Division, Calgary finished first, as they were 50, 20, and 11 for 111 points. And Edmonton, they finished second in the Pacific Division. They had 104 points, and Los Angeles finished third. They had 99 points, so ultimately Edmonton will be hosting Los Angeles in their series. Then the top three in the Central Division, the Colorado Avalanche, they had 119 points. So Calgary had 8 points fewer than the Colorado Avalanche. Second place in the Central Division went to Minnesota, as they had 113 points in 82 games. And in third place, it was the St. Louis Blues. They had 109 points in 82 games. So Minnesota would be hosting the St. Louis Blues in their series for the 2-3 in the Central. The first wild card actually ultimately went up to the Dallas Stars. They had 98 points. And then the second wild card went to Nashville. They had 97 points. Which means that the Calgary Flames actually get to draw the Dallas Stars in the first round, after it looked like Nashville for the longest time. While the Colorado Avalanche, they get to host the Nashville Predators. So we'll see how that plays out. But I'm going to still say it'd be interesting to see how things will shake up with the Calgary Flames and the Dallas Stars. I will be making a first round preview in the next episode, breaking that series down. However, the hilarious part in the Western Conference, the Vegas Golden Knights missed the playoffs. They had 94 points, so they were 3 points out of a playoff spot. So I'm not feeling too bad about Vegas missing the playoffs. So yeah, the playoff matchups in the Western Conference is Colorado will be hosting Nashville, Calgary will be hosting Dallas, and then you got Minnesota hosting St. Louis, and Edmonton hosting Los Angeles. So which series are you most looking forward to when it comes to the Western Conference? So the Eastern Conference, it was definitely stacked, as ultimately in the Atlantic Division, the President's Trophy goes to the Florida Panthers. They had 122 points. So will the jinx go on, or we'll see when it comes to the President's Trophy. So that is the first in the Atlantic Division. Second in the Atlantic Division goes to the Toronto Maple Leafs. They recorded 115 points. Third place goes to the Tampa Bay Lightning. They have 110 points. So Toronto actually gets to host Tampa Bay in the first round. Now going to the Metropolitan Division, you had the Carolina Hurricanes win the division. They had 116 points. Second place is the New York Rangers. They have 110. Third place is the Pittsburgh Penguins. They have 103 points, so ultimately the New York Rangers in the 2-3 will be hosting the Pittsburgh Penguins. So the first wild card will be going to the Boston Bruins. They have 107 points. Second wild card goes to Washington. They have 100 points. And then the biggest gap was the New York Islanders were the first team outside looking in. They had 84 points, so the top 8 was definitely the strongest in the Eastern Conference. So ultimately, playoff matchups goes is the Florida Panthers will be hosting the Washington Capitals. And then the Carolina Hurricanes will be hosting the Boston Bruins. And then the Toronto Maple Leafs will be hosting the Tampa Bay Lightning. And the New York Rangers will be hosting the Pittsburgh Penguins. So, what series are you most looking forward to when it comes to the Eastern Conference? I'm going to say they're all going to be pretty good. I know Carolina and Boston have always had some great classic playoff matchups, including if you call the Hartford Whaler days as well. Of course, it'll be interesting to see if Florida can, finally get out of the first round. They have not gotten out of the first round since 1996 when they last went to Stanley Cup Finals, and then same with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I wouldn't be too sad if the Toronto Maple Leafs beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, not only for June 2004 reasons, but getting tired of seeing Tampa Bay winning the Stanley Cup. And then does Pittsburgh have any more, magic left with Sidney Crosby and a Gabe Elkin, or is this the New York Rangers' time? So that is the standings. So when it comes to the Flames stats, ultimately leading the team in scoring is Johnny Gaudreau, as he had 115 points. Actually, that is the second most points in franchise history. Kent Nilsson for the Calgary Flames in 1980-81 had 131 points. I'm going to still say that number is going to be unlikely broken anytime soon. But Johnny Gaudreau had 40 goals, 75 assists for 115 points. Second in scoring was Matthew Tkachuk. He had 42 goals, 62 points, and 104 points. So the Calgary Flames had two players that surpassed 100 points. And then Elias Lindholm was third in scoring. He had 42 goals, 40 assists for 82 points. So Calgary had three players with 40 goal scorers. And then Andrew Mangiapane, he had 35 goals, 20 assists for 55 points. So you could say we had four 30-goal scorers. And then right at the top five is Rasmus Andersson. He had 4 goals, 46 assists for 50 points. So that's the top five scoring when it comes to the Calgary Flames. And then when it comes to goaltending, well, Jacob Markstrom, he had 37 wins, 15 losses, and 9 overtime shield losses, with a 222 goals against average, 902 save standards, and 9 shutouts. And then Dan Vladar, I'm going to still say, did pretty good for a backup, as he played in 23 games, 19 games started. He was 13-6-2, with a 275 goals against average, 906 save standards, and 2 shutouts. That's what I figured out from the preseason, that when Dan Vladar played, I'm going to say, hey, we might actually have a decent backup to Jacob Markstrom that we can count on. And I'm going to say this team looks very built for the playoffs, as I should say. Let's hope for more than just a brief cameo with the Dallas Stars. So that is the Calgary Flames stats and standings. So the next part, let's take a look at our Stockton Heat with the Stockton Heat quick hits. So let's bring that up. So the Stockton Heat, they were wrapping up their regular season as well. Actually, let me go to the Stockton Heat website here quickly so I can bring up their stats and standings when I get there. But, oops, hang on here, Stockton Heat. But the interesting thing with the Stockton Heat is that the AHL playoffs is definitely structured a little differently this year, and I guess there's still some imbalance in the American Hockey League when it comes to playoffs and number of games they play in the regular season, because actually the Stockton Heat play 68 games as well as the other teams in the Pacific Division, but there were other teams that played 76 games. But the Stockton Heat actually clinched the Pacific Division as well, so they actually have a bye in the first round, and they're going to wait for the divisional playoffs best of 3. So I'm going to do a separate videos on how the Stockton Heat done in the playoffs, because it's not going to line up with the Calgary Flames, so watch for that. So the last 3 games, game 66, Saturday, April 23rd, the Stockton Heat were taking on the Bakersfield Condors at the Canucks Bank Arena. This was an 8 p.m. puck drop on the road. And I think the Stockton Heat were also kind of taking the same approach as the Flames. Actually, the Stockton Heat were shut out 4-0 in this one, as it was Adam Warner who was in net for Calgary. Actually, Dustin Wolf, he was an emergency recall for the Calgary Flames. For one game, I think Dustin Wolf, he was dressed for the Flames as backup against the Canucks, where I think they were giving Jacob Markstrom a night off. So Adam Warner was in net for Calgary, or Stockton this one. Made 35 saves, and Stuart Skinner, he made 22 saves for the shutout for Bakersfield, as Bakersfield is the Edmonton Oilers farm team. So that was, and Bakersfield also outshot Stockton 39-22. So that was Game 6-6. Game 6-7, this happened on Tuesday, April 26th, as Stockton Heat were taking on the San Diego Gulls at the Pajanga Arena, and Stockton won this one 4-1. This was an 8 p.m. puck drop. Emil Pedersen had 2 goals for Stockton, while Nick DeSimone and Walker Deer each had a goal assist. Highlight that Martin Postol and Jacob Markstrom had a fight in this one, and Adam Warner was in net. He made 25 saves for Stockton. So the final game of the Stockton Heat's regular season, this game 68, this happened on Saturday, April 30th. As the Stockton Heat were taking on the Bakersfield Condors again in Bakersfield at the Canucks Bank Arena. Bakersfield won this one 3-1. The only goal went to Matthew Phillips, and Dustin Wolf was in net. He made 33 saves. And actually, a couple players in the American Hockey League for the Stockton Heat made the rookie team, as they had a rookie line. Dustin Wolf for goaltender and Jacob Pelche for winger were on the rookie team for the American Hockey League, so congratulations to them. So ultimately, the Stockton Heat, they finished first in the Pacific Division with 45 wins, 16 losses, 5 overtime losses, and 2 shootout losses for 97 points. How their playoffs work is the Stockton Heat actually have a bye going into the divisional semifinals. I know they have a best of 3 for the play-in, which in that video, when I break down who the Stockton Heat play in the first round, how their playoffs work, but they have a bunch of best of 3s, and then there'll be a couple best of 5s, I believe, in the divisional semifinals and finals, and then the conference finals and the Calder Cup finals are both best of 7s. I know they expanded the playoffs in the American Hockey League because they also haven't been able to have a championship the last 3 years, but it won't line up with the Calgary Flames still like a playoff, so the Stockton Heat Quick Hits will be its own show for as long as their playoff run goes on. At least that's my plan. So when it comes to the leading goal scorers, Matthew Phillips led the team in scoring for Stockton. 65 games, he had 31 goals, 37 assists for 68 points. Jacob Pelche was second. In 66 games, he had 27 goals, 35 assists for 62 points. Third was Glenn Godwin. In 62 games, he has 15 goals, 35 assists, 50 points. Fourth is Justin Kirkland. In 66 games, he had 25 goals, 23 assists for 48 points. Around the top 5 is Luke Philp. In 66 games, he has 21 goals, 23 assists for 44 points. And then Connor Zary was 10th in scoring. In 53 games, he has 13 goals, 12 assists for 25 points. I'm going to say Jacob Pelche definitely had a better season as a rookie in the American Hockey League than Connor Zary, but Connor Zary had some injury issues as well. Another player that I can also highlight is Walker Durer. In 59 games, he had 11 goals, 12 assists for 23 points. And then there's a couple players that good look at that bounced up here and there, but those are like the top scorers and the more notables. So when it comes to goaltending, well, Dustin Wolf, I'm going to still say he had insane numbers. In 33, he had 33 wins, 9 losses, 4 overtime losses, 1 shootout loss, with a 924 save percentage, and a 235 goals against average, but said no shutouts. So that was Dustin Wolf. And then Adam Warner. In 21 games, Dustin Wolf played in 47 games. And Adam Warner is 12, 6, 2, and 1, with a goals against, or a save percentage of 886, and a goals against average of 304. So that is the goaltending tandem. I know that Daniel Cheliev also played that one game, the goaltender that we drafted in 2020. So that is the Stockton Heat quick hits. So before, obviously look ahead, to give you a preview, I did already put it in as a separate video, but if you're ready this far, well, here's the preview video that I'm going to put in for my Calgary Flames playoff game recaps. So here's that video. Well, that gets you ready for playoff hockey, wouldn't it? So yeah, obviously looking ahead will be the first round of the Stanley Cup Playoffs as the Calgary Flames will be taking on the Dallas Stars. That will be the next episode. I'll break that down more in depth on how the matchup goes, playoff history, and the schedule, and who do I ultimately think is going to win. So I'll talk about that more in depth in the next episode. And I mentioned the Stockton Heat. I'll just make separate videos on their playoff run because their playoffs are never going to line up with the Stanley Cup playoffs. So my final thoughts on the regular season as a whole is that definitely, mostly was positive, obviously, where we had the second best record in franchise history. We made the playoffs. That's ultimately what we strive for. The 4 40-goal scorers and Matthew Tkachuk, Elias Lindholm, and Johnny Gaudreau. A couple of those players on contract years will be interesting to see. And then 2 players that getting 100 points, and Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk. So we're doing things that we haven't done in a generation. But ultimately, I'm going to say we have to get out of the first round. We cannot sell for another one and done. Because if we're one and done again in the playoffs, that same conversations we'll be having about the core and the management will be just the same as if we missed the playoffs. But I think the way this team is built, I don't think that's going to happen. And also the other thing when it comes to any awards, there's debate on where Johnny Gaudreau, if he has entered himself in the Hart conversation. But I think the one award that has to be hands down going to Calgary Flame is Daryl Sutter for Jack Adams. He has to win the Jack Adams for sure. And also all his press conferences. My favorite one this year was when he talked about pillows and cushions. I can never look at pillows and cushions as a theme thanks to Daryl Sutter. But I'm going to say this team definitely had its lull. I'm going to say their lull happened in January, after when we had that COVID outbreak, and strength of schedule, but I think this team is more ready to take on those teams if we go on a run. So that's just my quick final thoughts, and just watch for my first round preview, as we'll talk about the Calgary Flames and the Dallas Stars. I kept thinking we were going to play Nashville the whole time. Did Nashville not want to play Calgary, or I don't know, it just looked weird that when I was scoring watching, it looked like after Dallas won, Nashville was playing Arizona. They came out to a quick 4-0. That's it. I guess Nashville really wants the playoffs. It would be an entertaining series, but it's no cakewalk either way. But I think this team needs to get out of the first round. I'm expecting this team to actually get to the conference championship. I'm going to say before I consider this team a success, if you ask me, given how this team is built and how they perform. So that's all that. So anyways, like I say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, home the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, Stampeders, and the Cavalry FC. As I mostly do talk Calgary sports from each hour, recap games, story that, but I also do have a variety of non-sports content, personal logs, attempt to call me, and also do share my experiences. Let's say I'm on the road or a sporting event, and I've done some logging to go. Of course, all that secondary stuff has been when I've had time. But if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, do follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey. Now that we are going to the Stanley Cup Playoffs, just make sure you hit like, subscribe. I also have my other social links down in the description below. For other ways you can follow me, and I do have my second channel on Brett Harmon Shorts, so I put my Calgary Flames quick post-game recaps on there. That will still continue for the Stanley Cup Playoffs until we win, right? I can dream. At least we're in it. Half the league makes the playoffs. So it means you got to be a pretty good team to make the playoffs, or at least in the playoffs. So I can still legitimately dream that Stanley is still going to come here just in time for the Stampede. It's been 33 years. We need Stanley to come back here to Calgary. And it'd be nice that I actually would be old enough to appreciate a Stanley Cup victory, but we got a lot more work to do before that happens. But it'd be awesome if it did. So I just want to say, go Flames, go Heat, go in the Calder Cup Playoffs. I just want to say thanks for watching. Watch for my first round playoff preview, and I'll see you in the next video.